everyone. Welcome to the Pragati Vichar Literature Festival 2023, organized by Frontlist Media. This year's theme is Taking Humanity Forward. Today, we all are present here to celebrate the affection for literature and discuss the pivotal subject matters prevailing in the society and establishing engaging conversations with the audience. And the session theme is history and mythology. And the topic for today's session is Journey from Illusion to Reality. It is such an interesting topic, and today we will be talking. First one is Saksham Garg. He has recently, written a book, his debut book, Samsara. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing this correctly. So I'm going to introduce Saksham Garg to all of you. Saksham Garg is an editor at Penguin Random House, India, for 7 years. He studied at Woodstock School, Missouri, from where he could see the snow-capped seven hills of his story. He currently spends his time between New Delhi and Jaipur, and outside of work is often found on the football field or practicing the violin. He has recently penned down his debut novel, Samsara, Enter the Valley of the Gods, published by Penguin Books. So, my first question is to you, Saksham. Your book, Samsara, is a fusion of mythological fiction and fantasy. How did you come up with the distinctive storyline of this book?
All right. To be very honest, it wasn't such a task, primarily because there is a dearth, and I speak both as an author in the space as well as a fiction editor of Penguin, of fantasy and mythology books, or at least a cross section of them in India. There are a lot of retellings of mythology. However, there are not many that feature both a fantastical or a mythological narrative together. And that was the driving force to bring about this novel here, which is, the USP is to have um, fantasy mixed with mythology. I have had the pleasure of working on and editing and also reading books of my friends, authors, etc., that primarily talk about retellings of a particular mythological figure, uh, deity, etc. However, by virtue of the fact that Samsara was or is one of the first mythological fantasy novels in India. When I say mythological fantasy, of course, I'm referring to Indian mythology meets fantasy. Um, it was very clear to me that almost any storyline that I took was going to stand out because, like I said, there's not much to compete with. So I, followed the universal arc structure because I see this as a gateway for a lot of readers into fantasy, which is a relatively unexplored territory here in India, whereas mythology continues to be widely read. So through the means of uh, the popular Hindu gods, I thought I could create a magical world that featured them, and this is the magical world that is featured in Samsara. And to sort of wrap up, why this is distinctive, it features 10 modern day individuals from 2022 India from all walks of life: rich, poor, young, old, believers, atheists, that are kidnapped and transported to this magical realm, which, according to our scriptures, is alive and hidden somewhere in the Himalayas even today in 2022. And these 10 modern day individuals find themselves face to face with the Hindu gods and mythical beasts. And the entire book is about what they encounter when they reach there. So, to answer your question, it wasn't tricky to come up with a distinctive plotline. It was, I think, the entire battle or the battle for this entire thing was to make an engaging, fantastical story around the much used genre of mythology.
Thank you so much. I want to add one question to this. I can see that you are very much interested in writing or reading mythological and fiction. But other than that, what are your other interested? If you're interested in any other genre.
This is a question, thanks, I get asked often. Um, and in this particular order, my favorite genres are: number one, horror; number two, writing about writing. I like to dive into the niceties of writing, and I read a lot of writers that have written on the art of writing, and particularly fiction writing. And third, of course, fantasy. But because I'm an editor and have also been reading a lot of fantasy, it was clear to me that if I was going to try and bring out a book meant for the masses, it was going to be in a space that, as a Penguin editor, I believed had demand in the country. And therefore, fantasy and mythology is what I landed upon when it came to working on a book myself.
Thank you. Okay, so Saksham, you have carved out a mystical land with mythological creatures and interwoven them into an enthralling tale. How did you incorporate the Rig Veda into your story?
Oh, wow. Okay. There's so much I want to say. So, the Rig Veda is the oldest sacred text in the oldest religion in the world. And interestingly, it is currently the oldest religious text in use. Uh, we chant Rig Veda verses when in Hindu ceremonies all the time, even today. There is no older religious text. So it was very important to me to try and bring forth this forgotten text. Rig Veda is hardly discussed in India today. And how did I incorporate it into my storyline? Well, Rigveda is almost synonymous with one deity because out of the 400 plus verses in the Rigveda, more than half of them are dedicated to Lord Indra. And Lord Indra is a major character in Samsara. So it was very obvious to me that if Lord Indra was going to be playing a massive role in the book, Rigveda was going to find itself easily. Another way in which Rig Veda is incorporated in the text is because of the very nature of the magical world that is Vanyasa. Vanyasa is a hunter gatherer Vedic world. It is a world in which there is equal respect for animal, human, trees. There is simplicity, and also a term that has found negative context recently, but the Swadeshi movement. But going back to our roots, living from that perspective, that's how the Rig Veda was incorporated. And that's not the only religious text that is in the book. There are mentions from the Vishnu Puranas, particularly the Samudra Manthan, or the churning of the ocean story, from which came out the Kalpavriksha, or the poison of Halahala that Shivji drank and his throat turned blue. In fact, very interestingly, it is believed that when Lord Indra, the king of the Devas, was coming back with the Amrit, the nectar of immortality, back to his home on Mount Meru or Amravati, four drops dropped in India. And it is said that that's where the four Kumbh Melas are taking place today. But interestingly, that's nowhere in the Vishnu Puranas. It's just been perhaps created later. So, it is through these through these Vedic texts, and through the Vishnu Puranas, relatively obscure pieces of our religious texts, that I was able to incorporate into Samsara, and through the means of Rig Veda and Vritra, which is the major antagonist in the oldest religious text and the oldest religion in the world. Um, I was able to mold that into the narrative of Samsara.
Thank you so much. So, Saksham, your book presents a bold perspective on how we view religion today. What message do you wish to impart to readers, considering the religious hatred, that has resurfaced over the past couple of years?
That is the core message of samsara. In one line, a religion is viewed by everyone outside by by how that religion treats other religions. For example, for a long time, by virtue of the terrorism that Middle Eastern Islam has been associated with,
Mm-hmm.
Islam got the tag of intolerance. Similarly, the hatred that spread across our country right now, the international media now sees Hinduism synonymous with terrorism. But the core, original, and the first founding sacred texts of Hinduism are completely the opposite. They talk about ahimsa, and when I say ahimsa, ahimsa as a term long precedes Gandhiji. Ahimsa means animal equals humans equals trees. It means the confluence of all faiths. And through the means of samsara, through this fictionalized narrative that popularizes Hinduism, I try and show that if the Hindu gods existed and were alive today, they would erase the idea of themselves just to stop killing in their name. Why? Because the idea of God was created to serve humanity, to extend peace, to extend goodness. But today, the idea of God seems to kill more than it does salvation. And therefore, I believe that if a God truly existed, he or she would erase the idea of themselves just to stop killing in their name. And that is the core message of samsara.
Okay, so are you an atheist, or do you also believe in religion?
I am an atheist until I'm in a tricky situation or at the hospital.
Okay, good to hear that.
Yeah. But I've grown up as a Hindu, so this is obviously a choice that I've learned to realize in this latter half of the 27 years of my life until now.
Saksham, there's a saying that an illusion shared by everyone becomes a reality. So, can the same be said about mythology? Please express your thoughts.
Definitely. In fact, it must be said about mythology, and here's why. And Samsara actually talks about this in extreme detail. Um, the genesis of God or the idea of God, how did it exist? How did it come into existence? You see, the Rig Veda features, like I said, Lord Indra as the protagonist. He is the major deity in the book, in the sacred text. But Lord Indra is the king of the gods, but most importantly, he's the god of rain. And why that is important is you have to understand that during the Vedic times, humans were hunter gatherers. They did not have the luxury or the art of agriculture. They were going around hunting, and most importantly, they were going around gathering food from trees. And once that land ran out of all supplies, they would move to another land. And the only way they could learn to settle down, multiply, was through agriculture. And at that time, the only way that could happen was through water. And that's why the idea of God started to come into existence. The idea of rain was so important to humans back then that they decided to create an illusion of a God around it. And I talk about that. I talk about in the book that the idea of God started because the idea of God is the best novel ever written. The idea of God is the best story that has ever been written. It's so prevalent that it happens to be now widespread throughout the globe. And it started off by one or two or three humans, or perhaps a lot more, and it grew as an idea up until it became an idea that was adopted. And then it became into written text. And then it became gospel. It became something that people had to adhere to. And slowly, this illusion turned into reality. So, for sure, mythology is that. Mythology is nothing but someone's ideas, experiences, invocations, thoughts, feelings, uh, to be able to, whether it's to whip people into masses or to help them with devotion or to just help them, to give them courage. I mean, that's the idea of mythology of God. And definitely, I completely agree. It can be said about mythology, just the way that it is believed that the idea of God even existed in the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
plus, what advice would you like to give to all the budding writers who want, who want to write about mythology or fantasy or fiction?
Yeah, I get asked this question often, Nancy, I'll be honest. And the only and most important advice that I have to offer is, do not aim for perfection. Writing is about rewriting and editing. And therefore, you have to understand that it's more important to get the words down on paper, irrespective of what level quality that they're at. So do that, get the words down, do not aim for perfection. Otherwise, people have trouble going past a certain limited word count. And in addition, for those who are able to come ahead of the advice that I've given, are at a slightly higher stage and are struggling to get the words in, do not wait for motivation. Writing motivation will come and go. Incorporate discipline, incorporate a love for writing, where it becomes like,
Consistency will be should be there.
correct, because motivation will come and go and it may not find you for months. That means your writing will be stuck. No, it needs to be about discipline. So whatever time, so whether it's a night owl or a early bird, but you need to find that
Hmm.
discipline to get 1 hour of writing. And what I'd like to tell my authors or anyone who's asking is, do it alternatively. 1 day of writing, second day of editing. So free write on 1 day, don't go back and edit the second day, write, edit, write, edit. That's what I have to offer. Yeah.
How much time did it take for you to complete your book?
So it's the journey started 10 years ago when I was in 10th class. But
You always wanted to write a book about. Okay.
yes, and I always wanted to write a
You
book,
have
and
the
I always
also
wanted
in
to be.
your mind at that time.
Sorry.
Did you also have the title in your mind?
No. Samsara, definitely. So the concept of samsara is very prevalent in the book, and I knew that I wanted to bring forth this concept. But this title from the book, obviously, it came out of the book, only happened much later. It happened when I became an editor, and it was my job to come up with titles of so many books that I realized it's hit me somewhere that the title of the book will have to be Samsara, and that I loved it. But no, it wasn't always in my mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed as our audience did. I hope, and I'm sure that your book will do wonders, and it is still doing wonders. I can see that. So congratulations on that once again.
Really appreciate it. And I did enjoy. And I really hope that anyone that's listening enjoyed equally. And thank you so much for the wishes. It really goes a long way.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You
Bye.
too. You too. Bye.